Hi, and welcome to Look Up with me, Andrew McCarran. I am a hypocrite. I'm someone with a severe phone addiction who's preaching to you about whether or not you should look up from the phone in your pocket. I am fully aware of that fact. So I'm reaching out to a number of guests to see whether or not what I'm saying is true, and whether you should look up from the device in your pocket, or whether you should look down and embrace the life you've got, and embrace the digital age we currently live in. Today's conversation is with Dr. Stacy Torres. She is an Assistant Professor of Sociology at the University of California, San Francisco, and the author of the upcoming book At Home in the City, Growing Old in Urban America, due to come out next year. She has written for a number of publications, but the one that caught my eye was for the LA Times, in which she outlined how she, at 44 years of age, does not and has never owned a smartphone, and does not feel the need to. In fact, actively avoids it. We had a long-ranging and incredibly interesting conversation about life without a smartphone, its drawbacks, its benefits, is it worth it, about attention and how that's changed in our society recently, about digital addiction and what we can do to combat it, and finally, generational differences. As I said, she's 44 years of age and I'm 25, and we look into each other's perspective on these issues. I really hope you enjoy listening to this as much as I enjoyed recording it. And thank you, Stacy, for your time.
So I've never had a smartphone, and I'm definitely not one of these people that is trying to convert other people or launch a narrative that says, all smartphones are evil. This is a terrible way to live. But it's definitely still worth it to me because I'm coming up against more and more complications in my everyday life when I'm trying to keep this going. So, for instance, I just bought my boyfriend and I tickets to see a Broadway show, which I only do in New York City when people are coming in out of town or I'm compelled. Nothing against Broadway, but it's something I associate with tourism, frankly. And so I bought these tickets online, right? I live in the world. I know how to buy things online, even though I really don't like it. I like brick and mortar going. I used to go up to the box office when I was a kid and actually like go buy the tickets. They give you the tickets, you go to the show. So I complete all the transactional steps. And then there's this note that says, well, even if you email your tickets to yourself, you need to display them on a digital device. And I thought, oh, wow, I'm coming up against another situation where it's going to be a huge complication, I guess, if I don't have this digital device. I guess I'm not allowed to print out a paper with a QR code. But this new boyfriend actually has a smartphone, which is a first for me. My other two long-term relationships, they also had flip phones. So I was like, okay, I get to be a free rider. I'll go forward them to him and he'll put them in his digital wallet or whatever you call it, and we'll be good. Uh, but that said, it's still worth it to me. And I think being able to preserve my way of being in the world is really important. I was talking to a journalist the other day who's trying to come up with some series of articles or maybe even a book project about attention and our attention. And we were talking about, she also has a landline and tries to kind of take digital vacations. And she's about 30, so right in your age range, a younger person, giving me hope that people are reclaiming their attention. And we were talking about, I know in this article I wrote for the Los Angeles Times, I guess last year, about not having a smartphone ever, I do discuss my predilection, I feel, to become very addicted to a smartphone. And I do think that that's true. But I also think I just want to sort of continue being strange, like, or continue preserving my ways of being that I've carried from, kind of being a younger person and an adolescent through my 20s and to now. So yes, it's definitely still worth it. I think if there are situations that come up in which I cannot function, that I'm going to have to confront that, like logging in to do my timesheet through my university. They are now not allowing me to use my flip phone to authenticate. And so they had to send me something called the YubiKey, which is like this USB thing that you
Yeah.
stick into your computer and you touch it, right? I was like, oh wow, magic that allows me to continue to keep my way of life going. Because by law, I had to look up California labor law. They cannot force you to have a smartphone and your employer unless they're going to pay for it. And even if they paid for it, I don't want it. So I'm glad to find this workaround. But I guess I'm just wondering, when is the day going to, come when there's an essential task I need to complete or a service I need to obtain, and there are no workarounds. And so I guess in terms of thinking about the benefits and the drawbacks, I mean, the benefit for me is one, I think continuing to be able to be myself and to protect my attention in the ways that I can. And it's very difficult. I mean, even texting on on a flip phone, believe it or not, under the wrong circumstances can be very addictive. I want distractions as well. And even though I don't have a smartphone, I still have a laptop that connects to the internet. And so anytime I'm bored or sad or just trying to work through a difficult piece of work or writing, the temptation's always there to like, let me check the weather, let me check my email, let me go check the New York Times homepage, let me do anything but the thing that I need to do and sit here and do. But as I was saying, the drawbacks are, it is difficult to not be able to access things out in the world. Like I was listening to the public radio station in New York City this morning, and they were saying, I think it's today or this weekend, all day, there'll be some free rides that you're allowed to access on the bike share program here, City Bike, and just go through the app. And I'm guessing that the app is probably a smartphone only app. So, those kind of things, again, are things that I miss out on, but I guess I'm still willing to miss out on more and more of those so-called benefits to protect the main benefit, which is me not having to carry a computer around in my pocket.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I think that bike one's actually quite funny. The the likening that I thought, so obviously with digital passes, I mean, here in London, the West End, like I think you still can print out a ticket because they'll just send you the PDF as an email attachment. What's interesting to me though is when I thought this was really going to kick in, I don't know what it was like in the States, but here in the UK, to get into certain events, there were you had to show your COVID pass, right? You had to show you were vaccinated for certain things. This was a very short period of time that this actually happened, maybe about 6 months. But in those 6 months, I remember thinking to myself, it will be impossible to not own a smartphone in a period of time. And it's actually interesting to me that according to what you were saying about California labor law, I think that's genuinely very interesting because I wouldn't have thought that was the case. Um, but no, that when I thought COVID passes were coming in, I was like, there's no way, right? You're gonna need to have this thing. It's almost like a thing that you're told, like it is in your pocket, almost mandated. Um, so that's an interesting one. It must be it must be quite a strange thing though with the boyfriend not having a smartphone because I'm sure like although you're around it and like you have all the tech and you have all this stuff, but in sort of day-to-day life in a relationship standpoint, not being around someone with a phone versus with a phone, do you notice, like, especially at that level of intimacy where you're seeing them all day or whatever it is, that like, are you noticing attention issues? Are you noticing things that you're like, oh, that's quite straight. Maybe that's because of, or maybe there's just a tendency to go and do things that on a smartphone instead of going and doing it the old ways. So things that like, have you found things that have almost caught your attention? You go, that's must be because he's got a smartphone.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I'll say it's a new relationship and we're long distance. So we're still learning, how it is like to spend time with each other. And it is fascinating though. And I'm noticing some things already, like for instance, so he lives in downtown Los Angeles and he actually, amazingly enough, and I'm amazed because one, I've got a sister that lives in Hollywood and had to either learn how to drive or leave that area. He doesn't have a car. He lives there. He knows how to drive, but he doesn't own a car. And I'm a lifelong New Yorker who never learned to drive, which is very common here. So I thought, oh, I wonder how this is going to work because I don't know how to drive. And it's not that I'm committed to that way of life. I just don't think I would be a very good driver, especially getting started at 44. It's not something right now that I'm looking, it's not an essential skill I'm looking to gain for better or worse. But anyway, he picked me up from the airport, and when he does need a car, this newer boyfriend, he's able to use this app, and rent a car for a couple hours. I think it's called Blink out there. And yet the app actually failed him. And one time he was going to go out and play some tennis game beyond where I guess the buses go, and he couldn't make it because the app wasn't working. There was a glitch in the app, and sometimes then you have to call people, and it's hit or miss whether they can help you. But so having that situation, definitely notice a difference in again, a service I'm able to access. Whereas my previous partner, who had a flip phone, would have to rent cars from a car rental place the traditional way,
Hmm.
and go there and sit there for a long time and try to pick it up. I've never had an iPad. And so my boyfriend now is an avid reader, and he actually reads papers too. So he
Yeah.
gets like everything from, magazine subscriptions, hard copies that come in the mail, occasionally buys the paper from a newsstand in downtown Los Angeles, but also has an iPad and is reading all sorts of stuff. And so that's fascinating. But I also think generationally, and this is where I'm relieved, I always thought, what's going to happen if I have a person in my intimate life with a smartphone? How's this going to work? And I guess because of his temperament, and he's a very sort of intellectual and engaged with the world person, and his age, he's almost 8 years older than me. He's able to kind of use it, I feel, as a tool, like a healthier way of using it, and not being totally obsessed with it, like not having it in his face all the time when we're talking, or I feel he's able to engage in the moment and be present when I'm present, and we need to make eye contact and talk with each other. But then of course we're very independent people, and so like he can do his thing and I can do my thing. And so we'll see how it goes, but I'm so far so good.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting one on the context of service. In the UK, there was a really big scandal about a year ago where they were trying to change because I know this is not I know it's not really a thing, like I know it is a thing, but I know it's a bigger thing in the UK for sort of rail is the big thing, whereas I know that I think as sort of a population percentage it's used a lot more in the UK than the States, but they were going to take down the ticket machines where you can just go up and pay for a ticket and it will print the ticket and hand it to you and you use that to get on the train, right? And they were going to replace it and it was app only. All trains in the country, app only, whatever. And that's the point that came into my head where, as you say, something like if it is that service Blink, like I'm sure this is a massive company. I'm sure this is a company that has servers upon servers upon servers, yet it breaks. It's not it's not what the Titanic was pitched as. It's not unsinkable. It will go down at some point. Whereas these old-fashioned systems that we seem to be just abandoning now, where what you tend to find is they worked all the time. They never, like as you say, that your
They're
partner.
reliable. I mean, we had decades of using tickets, and somehow it was fine until, there are interests out there, companies or businesses that, have this new technology, and not only are selling this as, a huge, I guess, solution to a problem we didn't know we had, but that's the only solution now. You can't have multiple ways of potentially accessing a service. And for me right now, I'm fortunate enough that this is now a choice. It wasn't always a choice. I couldn't afford, a fancy smartphone or expensive cell phone earlier in my life, or any phone. I mean, I had a time in my life when I didn't even have a phone. I didn't even have a landline, nothing, when I was kind of 22 to 24. So what happens to people who cannot access this because they cannot afford it, or maybe they're on the older end? And older people now, a lot of my research is focused on people who are older, 65 and up. And at the time I did my research, a lot of these older people were of a cohort from a generation we would call the silent generation. And so they were just not even involved in technology, many of them. Now you have people that are involved in technology, but still, like, the digital literacy and the comfort is not all the way there. And so even, they may use technology in different ways, but still want to walk up to a ticket machine potentially and buy a ticket.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that you say the age thing. Like my parents, like I'm 25, right? And my parents were quite old when they had me. sort of as the standard metric for parenting, I guess. My parents were touching 40, right? They were touching 40 at parents, and so what age is my parents now? What, 62 and 64? Or coming 62 and 64 this year, sorry. So they're sort of on the cusp of that bracket that you're talking about, that 65 and over bracket. And, I mean, my dad's a lot more, he's more aware of it, and he's much more aware of how to use these systems because he uses it in his working life, right? Same way that you've said yourself, you use tech in your working life every day. It's not as if you're anti-tech in any shape or form. So he gets it. And if there's a tech task that has to get done, it will be him doing it, right? But as a result, they do have smartphones. They have much more of an aversion to using them. They will use them the way that, you know, even in my, like, it might seem unbelievable of someone of my age, but like, I didn't have a smartphone really until like 2015, I guess. So they've already nearly been out a decade. And even the way before that, like they had brick phones, they had flip phones. And until, I'd say maybe about 2018, my mom had a flip phone. Before that, she didn't have a phone until like 2014, of any kind because she didn't like being reached. So for them, it's that thing that you were saying of it is a tool. They can put it down, they can walk away. It's not they don't really have apps on their phone. It's the bare bones apps of whatever phone I've decided to hand down that I used to own. Um, and it's a very interesting one for me, especially from an age point, because like with my brother being a few years older, my girlfriend being a few years younger, I'm slap bang in the middle of that, and especially in the point of attention that you've referenced a few times, which is it's a brilliant point. Like my brother can hyper focus. He can hyper focus on an issue for a very long time. My girlfriend's the same. She can hyper focus, and because either in my brother's case where social media wasn't really a thing when he was a teenager, so he had no real like he has Twitter, he'll look at it on a laptop or something, and even then he thought to himself, oh well, I'm using Twitter a bit too much. I'll just disable it on my phone and move on from it. So he uses it in that regard, whereas because my girlfriend, like, it was never really, it was just sort of always around for her. Like, I think social media really got big. Like, her age was still in single digits when it was getting big. So, if for her sort of like formative years, it was always around, right? So it wasn't a
Well, it's like
big
being a
deal.
goldfish in water. Are you noticing the water around you? You
Correct.
know, whereas I think in what you were, discussing in terms of having conscious transitions, like, oh, here's a new technology, or like in the case of mom and dad, okay, now we're going to go from this phone to that phone, and this phone will allow us to do these things, and well, it's kind of a more deliberate usage. And I guess even in your brother's case, like, oh, okay, there's this thing called Twitter, I'm going to start using it or see what's happening. Oh wait, I'm using it too much, I'm going to pull away a little bit.
Yeah, and I think like one of the other guests that I've had on was 18, right? And he
Wow.
would, yeah, right, and like
I'm
the
just,
guy,
18-year-olds, like, what's going on in an 18-year-old's
I was
life,
so curious.
period.
I had to know, right? I was asking this guy thousands of questions, but what I thought was interesting was like he seems to be a very rare kind of person where he's trying to make an active step to step away from digital life. It's not for him. And I was asking him, I was like, what's going on in terms of your friend group? Like, surely this is the thing. And he was saying, well, he said at my worst, I was using my phone about 5, 6 hours a day. And he was like, his friends were using it 11, 12, 13 hours a day. And if you add that up in terms of like in a week, you lose 3 days of your life. It's
Right.
crazy to me, right?
It's a lot. I mean, I was listening to the New Yorker Radio Hour this morning, and they have this social psychologist named Jonathan Haidt on, and he has a new book about younger people and technology. And it's interesting, he's very much making an argument of how dangerous some of this technology is. But his point, and I think it's valid and interesting, is thinking about just development and how people who are on the younger end never had a world without it. And so what does that do when it's shaping your social relationships? It's shaping your brain in different ways. It's just so immersive. And he cited one study that said, yeah, I think the average time, I forget if it was among a certain age group, but basically people are spending like 7, 8, 9 hours, this is typical, on screens and usage that's not related to work or school. So this is just pure like stuff happening in front of you, and you interacting with it in a way, I guess, that he's arguing is different than television. Because when I was growing up, it was like, oh, television is terrible for all sorts of things. And I remember, I mean, we were We were a household of like 4 kids. My mother was like very overburdened. We were poor, but we had a television. That thing was on from like morning to night. I feel like the family would have fallen apart. That was the sort of I don't know, like the glowing box that kept our family somewhat, I guess, conflict free enough during those years. But I think it's very fascinating that an 18-year-old could say like, this is just not, be so self-aware about their own habits and say, oh, this is not for me. It reminds me of this I guess club that I had stumbled upon in some media accounts last year when I was writing this article about some teenagers in Brooklyn that studied or rather started a Luddite club. And again, a 17-year-old, a 16-year-old. And it was fascinating how, deliberate they could be about relationship building and nurturing, and just say, look, if somebody isn't going to reach me, I guess, through my landline or send a letter or talk to me in the hallway, like if they must be involved in social media and smartphones and stuff, then this is not my tribe. These are not my people.
Yeah, I think it's definitely interesting because I think that that term that you use, deliberate, right? I think being deliberate in your actions is something that we're losing as a generation. Definitely, even just as a society, people don't do things deliberately anymore. And what tends to happen is you'll just throw something out there because it's so easy to do it, right? I mean, like you tend to find that things like articles and things like whatever, not that they're rarer because they're actually around it more than ever, but the amount that they're being read is sort of less than ever. And what people will do is they'll go, what's someone's immediate quick thought that they decided to throw out there while having a cup of coffee? That doesn't matter, right? It's just an opinion, it's just a whatever. What it's not is a well crafted going, okay, what are all the points that I'm trying to get across here? What are all the things that I would like to get across to someone who's reading this? And I can't remember who it was. I believe it was Ricky Gervais might have made this point that social media is just, it's like a town square. It's just someone, not even a town square. It's like just walking past someone on the street just screaming. Whereas if you're if you're in a big city, I mean, like if you're in New
Screaming
York,
your
I'm sure.
opinion. Yeah, if you're in New York, you're gonna be like, oh well, this person's just like yelling their opinion out about whatever. Let me run in the other direction, or like not even blink, like, oh, move on.
And that's it. And like it's the same in London. People scream all that. Like I remember I was on the train the other day and some guy was just spouting his opinion because I don't know, he decided that's what he wanted to do that day. And it's a strange one, right? Because what you tend to find is in real life we go, that's crazy. No way, no thank you. We put it away and we move on. Whereas what we're doing now at the minute is we're going, do you know what? Let's give that 6 hours of my day. And let me pay $1,000 for a box to do it and pay a subscription monthly plan so that I can have access to this. And we're almost just emptying our wallets to hear people's opinions that do not in any way matter. And then, as you said, then the attention just goes out the window. And I'm sure that I've no figures to back up what I'm saying, but I'm sure the attention of this generation is worse than the average attention of any other generation. I'm certain of it, even just from what I've seen in my own life.
Yeah, I mean, anecdotally, I feel like I've also just lost the attention I used to have when I was younger. I guess as a writer, it's kind of a hazard to be a writer because you just accumulate paper and sometimes it's hard to let go of. And so I've been working on just going through a lot of old stuff in my house lately. And I just think back about when I was younger, those sort of teenage years and younger years. I had so much more attention for just minutia, first of all. I mean, I had so many collections going. I was collecting shells and stamps and rocks and getting very immersed in all of these kind of esoteric interests. I remember just like laying on a bed all day long for hours and hours reading like my Nancy Drew books or my Flowers in the Attic books or whatever it was. I'm not saying it was all Shakespeare and high art, but whatever it was, I was able to immerse myself. And I wish I could get that attention back. And I don't know. I mean, I don't have children. I don't interact with a lot of younger people. And I don't teach undergraduate students right now because I'm teaching in a PhD program at the University of California, San Francisco.
Hmm.
So they're on the sort of older profile of maybe being like, late 20s, 30s, even 40s. Uh, but that said, it's yeah, it's really fascinating, I think, to think, and it could be empowering too. I mean, there's definitely positives that at your fingertips now, as any person or a younger person, like you said, you can just sort of like dash off your opinion, put it on TikTok, put it on YouTube, put it out on Instagram, whatever it is. And it's going to be there for a long time, kind of maybe never disappears. I don't know how the right to be forgotten regulations in Europe are going right now, but it's kind of going to be preserved in amber in some way. Maybe if you're lucky and you want it to be, maybe it'll be buried. But it's fascinating too that it's not just, you know, like the student paper, you're putting out an opinion and you're working on it and you're trying to draft a coherent argument of some kind or thought, that it's just out there, and that there are a lot of business interests that want you to, put content out there, whatever it is, or want to study what you're looking at and scrape that data and, find a way to make it marketable. It just reminds me, I actually never read this book because it's hugely long, but that's where my attention suffers. Like if there's a book that's more than 350 pages, it's tough. But the writer who's since passed, David Foster Wallace, he wrote this book, Infinite Jest, and lots of nonfiction writing as well. I was reading a compilation of his interviews, and there's this wonderful book series called The Last Interview. And so they had his last interview as well. And he was talking about in the mid 90s why he didn't have a television, and basically saying that if he had this television, he would be watching it all the time. And he makes this prediction, which is really fascinating, about how the technology is just going to get better and better. And the people that are making it, and I'm paraphrasing it, do not love you. They do not care about you. And they are going to make this technology so incredibly irresistible that you will be, pulled in. And I guess I'm the same way. I'm very delicate and vulnerable to that too. And like I said, I've lived a lot of my life, consciously trying to stay out of it.
I think the health side of it's very funny. I think what you're saying is like that company, they're putting out this thing, right? They're like, you are the person we're doing this for, right? We're putting all our efforts into making your life better. And it's like, well, no, you're not. You're trying to sell a product, right? And I think a really key example of this is Apple, right? What they do, it's so clever. I love it, but I hate it at the same time, which is whenever they do an Apple Watch. Have you ever seen an advert for an Apple Watch?
You know what? I don't have a television anymore, and this was because I married or I moved in with a man who didn't have a
Yeah.
television, and I try to skip over the YouTube ads as quickly as possible. So no, please describe me. So I haven't been bombarded with advertising, and it's always jarring when, like I'm traveling, I'm in a hotel, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like look at all these, in America, look at all these food ads, and of course look at all these pharmaceutical ads. But
It's
yeah, please tell me about the ingenious evil Apple Watch ads.
I love it. Right. It's so good because you watch it and if you turn your brain off for a millisecond, you believe it. And what they do is they will tell a story and it's so bad because it's true. And what they'll focus on is they'll be like, okay, because these things have like ECG capabilities that are signed off on or whatever, they will hard focus into that and they will go, we save lives with an Apple Watch. They were like, we got someone a notification that they were about to have a heart attack. They phoned an ambulance and they are better. You don't want to die, do you? Well, if you don't want to
Yeah, I mean,
die,
right
get
now
an
I'm
Apple.
kind of like, well, I don't know, maybe that could be useful as I'm wearing like an antique wind up watch full of from like the 30s or something. But I'm like, I don't know. This one's not going to tell me if I'm about to die.
But this is what's so good about it, right? And it's so clever because it's one of these things like, don't get me wrong, when it comes to fitness tech, it's one thing, it's a hill I'll die on, right? I do love it, but I want it to be as unintrusive as possible. So at the minute I've got this Apple Watch on. I don't look at it for anything fitness related, but I have a band on. It does not notify me. It does not tell me anything. It doesn't buzz. It just sits there, and the battery lasts like a week. And as a result, I love it because it doesn't. I don't have to interact with it in any way, right? But what they're putting is another iPhone on your wrist in a smaller form factor. You can text on it, you can call on it, you can check news articles on it. You can do all these things. It's fantastic, but it will save your life if you listen carefully enough. And you're going, well, in reality, no one sat down and went, let's save lives. What they did was go, how do we get people's eyes on their screen, but not really. And then what it does is then it builds up this ecosystem, right? Because then you go, well, I want a smartwatch and I have an iPhone. I'll buy the Apple Watch. And it's another thing that if you decide, oh, do you know what? I'm really sick of having a smartphone. You go, oh, well, I'm so financially invested because I bought the phone and I've got the watch as well. It'd be so hard to give it up. And it's just so clever.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. Well, they've got geniuses working there to try to figure out how to lure people in. I mean, it reminds me of any kind of media or technology where, I mean, think about the news, right? The construction of the news, even before, internet and the World Wide Web, you have certain stories that are there to, on the face of it, they may say, we're here to inform you, but really it's like, oh, wait, you're here to scare me, right? Because you want me to keep watching. So I better watch this because I don't know, there's a murderer running around. I need to be careful. Or there's like some kind of other thing that I need to know about, some phenomenon that if I'm not informed, I'm going to self-destruct. Or let's say the beauty industry. I wish I remember the author of this book, but I think that there's a book, or at least I'm going to take this phrase. I think it's wonderful about kind of the cosmetic and beauty industry selling hope in a jar, hope in a jar.
Yeah.
Like you put this cream on, you put this stuff on your face, whatever, it's gonna, transform you. It's gonna make your life great. You're gonna be blah 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 blah. And they're selling hope. And so even the watches and the tech connectivity, if you're like, oh, like me, again, I want to stay alive. I want to take care of my health. And so I'm like, well, I don't need to text on my watch. I don't need that. Like, I don't even need to track all this fitness stuff. Like I'm a person that I used to be very heavy when I was younger. Like I've sustained pretty much 100-pound weight loss
Yeah.
for more than 20 years. Writing down my calories, or like tracking things or whatever I've been doing. It sounds like using an abacus, but basically I didn't have like all this digital stuff to help me out. But when you say, well, it could save a life, or you could save somebody else's life, that's something that gives you pause. And then you have to like do all of the logical work that you just did to say, well, really, I mean, is this really, I know, as an academic, I would say, well, provide me the evidence. Have we studied this? Where
Yeah.
are the data that are showing me? Show me the studies that tracked how many lives were actually saved with this watch.
Well, this is the thing, and it's someone said this to me, and I thought it was really, really good, which is I do not disbelieve that an Apple Watch has saved lives. I don't disbelieve it. I don't disbelieve that there are massive benefits to this technology. If there were no benefits, it would not sell, right? It just wouldn't. No one would buy a smartphone if it didn't do anything, or if it only did bad things. But what it's so clever to do is you just have to look through it. Well, in my opinion, purely opinion, but I think you have to look through these things and go, what am I willing to give up for it? Am I willing to give up 6, 7 hours of my day staring at an app because I'm so addicted to it? Am I willing to pay all this money? Am I willing to do all these things? And as a result, it's one of those things where, like, the world's just so clever with it. And someone said to me, when it seems good, it's more dangerous. When there is a thing that you have that is almost faultless, and you go, well, it's so good, it does all these things. Of course, I'm going to do that. Why would I not do that? That would just be daft.
Right. Well, it's too big, it's too good to be true. But on the other hand, I mean, I think the power of what other people doing is very powerful. I mean, if you see everybody walking around, I mean, I live out in the world. I see people walking around with their watches, and in my work life, and just walking around the streets, whether I'm in San Francisco or I'm in New York or Los Angeles or what have you. And you wonder, like, I don't know, maybe they're onto something, or it can make you feel self-conscious. Maybe I'm not tracking, things the way that I should be tracking it. I'm not tracking my steps. I'm not tracking my heart rate. Maybe I'm not being responsible or taking care of something that I should take care of. And I think also it's the awareness. I still think that there's a lot of people, including myself sometimes, that are not aware. I think most people are not aware of how many hours that they're losing or spending on this technology. Just like a lot of people have no idea what they spend in a month. It's a bummer to have to write down every penny you spend. Like the financial advisors will say, and I've done that. Or if I don't even think I would want to try. I would be very self-conscious to write down all the hours that I waste, like reading, I don't know, Reddit like self-help boards or my horoscope or whatever it is. I mean, I waste time too.
It's like I think the one that I always find interesting is someone always says you spend like a year of your life sitting in traffic, something like that. Kind of those little things. It's something that's interesting, and whenever it's like it's not even a small percentage anymore. It's not like, well, if you add up all the times you pay, well, in your lifetime you might spend 3 days pet, like, that's small stuff that adds up over a long period of time. But I think it's so aggressively, like, I think if you compared mine and your day, you'd probably find that you had two of my days in terms of time that you've actually got to yourself, that you can do things, that you've basically got your mental clarity to do it. And I think it's insane because if you actually said to someone, would you want to give up half your conscious time? No one would say yes.
Right. No, I mean, you're like, here's what I'm offering you. I mean, I'll say, even with my little flip phone, it can handle a group text, and that's like Dante's eighth ring of hell. Being on a group text, just like so many people responding, or I mean, even it's like being on a reply all email that never ends, and people just keep replying all, and you're like, this is my life going by. I know that this is not right, but I can't get myself out of it. And I think the challenge with our current sort of predicament right now is that it is really, I mean, as I've told you, it is getting more and more difficult to abstain or take yourself out of it. And if you have a situation where you have a job, or if you have a child, I was talking to this journalist the other day who's interested in parents that don't have smartphones. And it's really difficult because the whole sort of structure around having a child, they're at daycare or school, they have to do their homework on screens now, or you get check-ins or whatever. Now I'm just making details up because I don't have a child, but like there's all of these different things that if you want to be, I guess, sort of accorded a responsible parental status, I think that could be really challenging too. And so it's just it's really all, it becomes all consuming, and it's really hard to kind of fight the current.
The kid one is interesting to me because, like I said, like I'm in a generation where I was formative when this was coming to be. I wasn't I wasn't five. I was of an age where I kind of knew what I was getting into. Whereas you see now, there was a news article this morning where I think over half of the kids in the UK use social media, and this is like 5 to 7. Well, half of kids under the age of 13, and I think now I could really get this wrong, so disclaimer and all that kind of stuff. Um, I think it was 3 in 10 or 2 in 10 kids 5 to 7 years old use social media,
Wow.
and it was like,
I'm
yeah.
like, what are they posting about? Bunnies? I don't know.
Well, this is the thing. Like, it
I
was.
hope so. I mean, who knows? Maybe they're posting about like the upcoming, well, not in UK, but the election or something. I don't know.
It was funny because I was watching Tom Segura, like, and he was talking about his kid who's like 4 or 5, and what he said about his kid was like, you're sitting in a car with him and they'll be like, I like yellow, and you're like, I'm really happy that you like the color yellow. Well done for you. It's like, but what they're doing is they're getting on WhatsApp, they're getting on Instagram, they're getting on Facebook, and you go, these kids are like, but their brains are sponges, and like,
Well, right. I mean, it's like kids say the darndest things. I
yeah,
remember picking up phrases and also wanting to emulate whatever, the adults in their life are doing. I mean, when I was a kid, we had the, pretend little phone and the pretend kitchen. The most brilliant was like the little broom and cleaning things because mom's like, yeah, emulate mommy. Like, go go clean the house and go make dinner. Like, get yourself ready for taking care of me in my older age. I'm just teasing, but I could see that's very powerful. And I guess for like a 4 or 5 year old, like I like this, maybe their next move is, who am I going to broadcast this to? Am I going to go to TikTok? Am I going to
yeah,
go to Instagram, take a whole bunch of yellow pictures and like show my audience of, I don't know, like first graders that,
yeah.
yellow is like the top color?
But this is the thing, and it's like, I think it was 3 in 10 parents in the UK now have actually said that if their kid between the age of 5 to 7 was on social media, even though there is a minimum age of 13, they wouldn't care. That scares me because
Mm.
we're in a world where, like, more and more people are passing iPads to their kids, and they're like, oh, well, just look at this and leave me alone. Um, Whereas, some people do that and it works, and some people actually get to inform their kids, and that's great. Whereas like I was in a very rare position for a 25-year-old where my mum was stay at home. She had to be for a number of reasons, but as a result, I was always around, and my mum was always sort of there to entertain. So it was never something that like, and it, look at the results of it. I feel like I'm quite a sociable person. I feel like I'm very outgoing and can talk to people because there was,
I think your mom did well.
well,
You turned out okay. It
but
seems, we're strangers, but we can talk. And I'm, pretty much 20 years your senior.
but the point of it is that like what my mom taught me was, focus on the thing in front of you. My mom was really strict about stuff like TV. She was like, don't watch too much TV. We weren't allowed TVs in the bedrooms. I have a TV in my bedroom now, but it's because I
That's
rent
a
a.
good one, but you didn't grow up with it. Yeah,
Well,
I learned that too.
well, this is the thing, right? And it's only because I rent a room, like I rent a room, not an apartment. Whereas I'm moving into an apartment shortly. I'm not going to have a TV in my bedroom. Absolutely not, because
Right,
there's two things for a bedroom, and one of them is not watching TV. So it's
right.
that thing of like, I, the
It's
kid
the
want,
sleeping room. That's what my ex-partner from Austria used to call it, the
yeah,
sleeping room. And I was like, it is the sleeping room. This is
and
what we should be doing. And, other activities as well, but not watching TV.
well, this is the thing. I remember I was talking to someone a couple of years ago, and what they basically said to me was this was when I was in university, and similarly to what I've got now, I rented a room, right? And as a result, my games console was there, my laptop was there, my phone was there, my music player, everything was in the room, right? And what he said to me was, "You've got a room that's designed for two things, and you're doing 200 in them. Your brain doesn't understand that. It's not what your brain is supposed to do." And in the same way, I think then with social media in the modern age, you've got so much information that your brain is not designed to handle.
Right.
And you get all these people that are, once again, personal opinion, disclaimer, all these kinds of things. Like the mental health issues that have just skyrocketed in the last 10 years. And mental health is an amazingly popular issue now. But either we've just got really good at spotting it or something else is at play. Like in the last 10 years, either, the news it's just gone, you know what, we really need to put a massive effort on this, which doesn't seem quite likely. Or there's a thing in your pocket that's making you anxious all the time because all you're being told is how terrible the world is.
No, I think you're onto something. And recalling this interview I was listening to with this social psychologist, I really have to go check this book out, Jonathan Haidt. He was saying, like, oh, well, in the 70s, we didn't even know if we were going to have like a nuclear war in a couple of years, but we weren't this depressed. We had a lot of hard things happening, lots of challenging things. And it's not to say that nobody was depressed or there weren't untreated mental health issues, but certainly it didn't feel like you had, again, like a feed of all of this information coming at you. And yeah, I'm finding more and more it's really hard for me to take it all in. And sometimes I feel like, almost guilty. Like I cannot read all this news. I cannot
Yeah.
take it all in. I cannot listen to it all day. And I read for work too. So I'm always like taking in a lot of information. And so I've had to consciously and unconsciously limit it a little bit
Yeah.
more. Like I just cannot follow every in and out of all of, like, I don't know, Trump's various criminal trials, or I cannot follow every detail of the terrible things that are happening in the world. I need to protect myself in some way. That said, I do try to stay informed. But I wanted to loop back to this idea of kind of focus and attention
Yeah.
and having
Yeah.
children. And again, this is all personal opinion, and I have no children in my life, and I've made a decision not to have children, I think, because I took care of so many younger siblings growing up. But I also had a mother that was very deliberate about our childhood in terms of, I mean, she was a poor woman who wasn't able to go to college, but really tried to nurture all of our creative interests, our schooling, take us to libraries, take me to the bookstore. And it takes a massive amount of time and energy and commitment to be a parent and to do that. And so I understand, when people are like, look, I need to, my child now needs to look at a screen for a while. I need a break. Like I get it. And I think that's one of the reasons why I've chosen not to have children, just because I'm sort of an all or nothing person. And if I can't do it like my mom did it, I'm like, I'm not, it's like with the smartphone, I'm not going to do it at all. Like either I'm all in or all out. But it's really, really difficult. And I think it's just there's so many demands on parents and children and providing and everything. And that's where I do think, again, I guess to jump on business again and big tech, that's their kind of opportunity. Like, okay, we see that this is like a frazzled situation, and now we can offer these services or products to, make life easier. And in the long run, I have a friend who's 94 years old, and she has a lot of sayings that I draw on in my need for comfort and wisdom. And one of them is cheap is expensive in the long run. Cheap is expensive in the long run. And sometimes I do feel like kind of a cheap answer, like, oh, okay, I'm going to like, patch up this problem, whether it's boredom, distraction, I need a babysitter for my child, whatever, via the screen. That's like seems like a quick, fast, maybe cheap solution that's going to have maybe longer term expenses in the future. And that's just my opinion. So I always try to follow that wisdom. I'm not always good at it, but I'm learning a little bit more and more.
I think that's a really interesting point. I think there's, in sort of manufacturing industry, the saying is measure twice, cut once, right? It's do the pre-work and put in the effort, you'll get the right thing. And like I have friends of mine, they will not buy something cheap. They refuse. They go, look, I will look into it. I will look into all the options of the thing. I won't buy the most expensive thing, but I will buy the thing that gives me the most out of it. Whereas I used to be someone who was like, oh, I'll buy a cheap T-shirt from Primark or Pennies, I guess, in the States. I'll buy one that's like a couple of dollars and it'll be fine. And then you go, oh, this T-shirt's gone to rubbish. I will have to buy another one. And as you say, and it's a really good, it's actually not, it's not a way I've heard it phrased before. And you're right, it's cheap is expensive in the long run if you buy it now and you do it properly. And if
And
you,
that was me too. Me,
yeah,
me was because we grew up pretty poor. So it's like, well, we might only be able to get like the cheap t-shirt,
yeah,
and then it doesn't last very long. And then so as I've kind of, I guess climbed the social ladder or matured or tried to kind of live my life differently as I'm going through life, I'm really trying to do the former now. And I
yeah,
appreciate it. Doesn't mean that you need the most expensive or the latest or the greatest, but looking for things that are durable and long lasting and
yeah,
quality. That's what I'm trying to do. And I guess that's what I'm trying to do in my life, in terms of relationships, in terms of experiences, in terms of the ways that I use time. Like, is this making me happy? Is this leading to something that, is going to be longer lasting? Is this going to be just like, junk food that I ate and wasn't very filling and, maybe made me happy for a moment and then I have the bellyache after? And I'm not perfect. I mean, I'm not like I'm just trying. I'm striving towards that. That said, every now and again, junk food can be pleasurable. Like, what a guilty pleasure can be pleasurable. So there's room for a mix, but I guess, it's kind of has to be in moderation. And I guess there's this book that I'm still reading. I've been reading this for more than a year now because it's not a book it's not like a novel or page turner. It's kind of a guide for life, but it's called Discipline is Destiny, and it's about like using sort of philosophy from the Stoics, the ancient Stoics, and applying that to your life. And I find that a lot of the things that I'm blanking now on the author's name, but I'm finding a lot of the things that I was taught when I was younger, I are lessons in there, and I do them. And then a lot of things I have to kind of try harder or go back to those habits. And then some things I never do. Like I'm not like an early morning person, but one of the I'm trying to be a little bit. I mean, I'm a reasonable person because I have to function in a capitalist world. So I can't live till like I can't have the total bohemian style I would want to, but I am trying to like use my time wisely and use those
yeah.
morning hours when I have my most energy, my most creative. I'm not like depressed by the day to do, like writing or something that's going to be really important and needing that focus and attention.
Yeah. No, I think you're incredibly right, and I think that point, yeah, I think you have to do it and you have to do it right, and you have to make the right choices. And I do not believe for a second that anybody who looks back on their phone usage would say that they've made the right choice in what they're doing. I don't think anyone would look back at the end of the day and they would go, okay, I spent 4 hours on Twitter. Was that the good thing to do? Is that the right thing to do? And there's always this thing for, um, there's always this thing when it comes to sort of improvement stuff and trying to make yourself a better person. And they always ask the same question or they make the same point, which is, you know, do tomorrow's version of you a favor every day. You know, live your life in a way that tomorrow's version of you will go, oh, brilliant. Thank you for thank you for putting in the work that I'm actually more prepared.
Right. The
And
work and the consistency, like you're saying, sort of that daily effort towards whatever,
yeah,
towards being that person that you want to see tomorrow.
yeah, exactly. And I don't think, I don't know, maybe it's just me. I don't, I think I've had a point with it. I think I've got a point where I feel like my life's just going down the toilet. Like not in a life sense, but in terms of like I'm throwing it down the toilet. I'm going, I've got this many, it's like chucking half my meal out every day and wondering why I'm hungry. It's like I'm chucking half of my time out and wondering why I get nothing done. And I go, oh, I'm always so busy. I'm always doing whatever. And it's like, I'm not busy. I'm not.
Right. No, it's
It's
about claiming it. And I've had that time too where I'm like, how did I just sort of waste this whole day? I mean, I give you a lot of credit again, being 2 decades younger than me and realizing this stuff. I think when you're younger, I mean, it really is hard to feel that urgency of time. You're like, oh, time is infinite. Like I've got like all the time in the world in front of me. And I think getting older for me, and also having a lot of early loss. I mean, my mom died when I was 16. My father died a couple years ago. And I remember sort of like feeling, oh, we have limited time. Like
yeah,
I'm 40 something now, in 20 years, if I'm lucky, knock on wood, and I get to live that long, I'll be 60 something, knock on wood. And that's not that long. I
yeah,
remember a person I spent a lot of time with for my book that's coming out on older people in New York City. He was a working writer. His name was Eugene. And he died when he was 93. And he was always working. He used a typewriter. He actually did use the internet and email and stuff. He was kind of ahead of the curve there. But I remember when he turned 90 and I said, how fast did your life go? And he snapped his fingers. Like it was so
yeah,
quick. And I just always remember that. And so I think, thinking about, I do now, I mean, I have a gallows sense of humor, but sometimes I'm like, on my deathbed, am I going to be happy that I spent this much time doing this or this much time
yeah,
doing that? Because I remember like taking care of my dad in his last month of life. This was during the pandemic. And so I remember having to go to the grocery store like 2 days before he died. And I had to be in this line and I was waiting and waiting. They lined us up, it's outside New York City and you have to be spaced out and stuff because the capacity for the
yeah,
supermarket, they were limiting it at the time. And I remember feeling very present, like I am losing now 2 hours with my dad that I'm never going to get back, and that he's only got like maybe a couple days left. It was very, very pressing. So I always try to remind myself of those moments when I'm very conscious of losing time. And it's hard. I mean, sometimes, like you said, it could be half the day gone. But I think us becoming aware of our habits and where we might be losing time and where we can gain it and preserve it, that can be empowering. Just like, when people are like, oh, I have no idea how much money I'm spending, and they're trying to, like get out of debt, and then just kind of coming up with a plan is very helpful. And I speak about this from personal experience in the sense that, my parents had a lot of medical bills from my sister's surgery when we were younger, and they actually had to go bankrupt. And I remember the creditors calling and like hunting down my mom. And finally, she was able to like get the bankruptcy taken care of, get a clean slate, and sort of figure out, okay, what money do we have? What money do we not? So I think, I think that kind of strategy can also be helpful as we're trying to figure out in our lives, whether we're really young people or trying to help people or trying to help ourselves or older, how do we sort of coexist with this technology that can be really wonderful in a lot of ways, but really addictive and sometimes, all consuming at other times.
yeah. I think you're entirely right. I think that focus and that, number one, like I said, that deliberate nature, but I think having to look back and go, what is this for me? And that example of your dad's a really good one because, I've been in a situation like that, where, funny enough, almost an identical situation where you're like, I'm about to lose someone. I'm about to lose this opportunity. Get me. Like, it's like being in traffic when you need the toilet. Like, it's as if every single millisecond counts. And
And every light's red.
yeah, exactly. And it's just the question of how much do you value your time. And I guess the point that I'd probably make to sort of end on with this one is it's how much do you value your time. And if you're using the junk food of the digital world, as you put it, like that, you're not valuing your time. How much do you really value it? How much, and that, looking down the line and looking back, did I do the right thing? Did I value my time? Did I spend my time wisely? It's the best you can do, and all you can do is try and strive for spending your time the best way you've got it. Because as you've said, there's not a lot.
Right. Yeah, no. And what does our time give us? What is the value of it? What is, and how do we value ourselves? And how do we honor the things that we might want to do? And so maybe, maybe there's something to just saying, okay, like I have this many hours, I have this time. Like what do I want to do and how do I get there? So yeah.
Fair enough. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it. You've been
Yeah, it was
absolutely,
fun.
it's been a lovely conversation. I've really, really enjoyed it. So we'll end. Yeah, I think we'll end there. Perfect.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, no, I had a good chat and you got me thinking about lots of different things. And yeah, tell your mom again. I think you're a rare 25-year-old. I really do think so. In a good way, in a good way. And not like you're like a sainted, like, particular unicorn or
Yeah,
anything, but I'm glad that you're thinking about these things for sure and talking to other people. And I'm excited to see the episodes as they come about, whenever they come about. But yeah, thanks for reaching out and reading my work so carefully. I think you know that article better than I do. I got to read it again now because people keep emailing me about it.